Most successful people in the world have heard no a million times and kept going. That's how they got there. They didn't get there because they took the path of least resistance. They didn't get there by having everybody just love them and fall all over them. They got there through a lot of closed doors that they just kept knocking on.
Are you overwhelmed by motherhood and barely keeping your head above water? Are you confused and frustrated by how all the other moms make it look so easy? You can't figure out how to manage the chaos in your mind, your home, or your family. I get you, mama. Parenting with ADHD is hard. Here is your permission slip to let go of the Pinterest-worthy visions of organization and structure fit for everyone else. Let's do life like our brains do life. Creatively, lovingly, and with all our might. When we embrace who we are and how our brains work, we can figure out how to live our lives successfully and, in turn, lead our families well. At the end of the day, we just want to be good moms. But, spoiler alert, you are already a great mom. ADHD does not mean you're doomed to be a hot mess, mama. You can rewrite your story from shame spiral to success story. And I'll be right here beside you to cheer you on. Welcome to Motherhood in ADHD. Hey there, Successful Mama. It's your friend, Patricia Sung. Today on the podcast, we have my friend, Crystal. Now, Crystal and I have known each other for quite a few years. Our kids went to preschool together, and I have watched her just blossom from corporate go-getter. She's an attorney, into creating her own business and really lifting women up. I think that is one of her greatest gifts of encouragement and seeing where women need to hear the good stuff and lift them up and connect and see the beautiful gifts that you have, that you can build this beautiful life and you deserve it so much. So Crystal is on a mission to empower women to pursue their dreams with confidence, authority, and purpose. She left her successful and very stressful career at a Fortune 500 company as an attorney, both as a leader and as an attorney, to find more time, money, and freedom and trade in the life of stress for her new role as entrepreneur and coach so that she can be more present with her family. She helps other women define their own path to success, wealth, and health so that you too can have the joy, faith, and freedom that she's created for herself. She believes that everyone can build the dream and find true satisfaction and fulfillment. They just need to get clear on their dreams, build the courage, and find a little inspiration. And that is why she launched the Get Clear with Crystal Ware podcast. And there's over 100 episodes for you to go nosh on. And she recently launched a new website called The Well-Defined Woman, which you can find at thewelldefinedwoman.com, because you are made for more. So join her in creating that for yourself over there on her new website. Today, Crystal and I jump into, it was a really great conversation about going back to the basics, and she has some really great questions about how we support our kids. Then I asked her about how do we have those tough conversations with a boss or somebody in power when we feel like either we are being a people pleaser and we're not speaking up for ourselves, or we feel like we're bulldozing through and people aren't taking us seriously or they're misconstruing what we mean. How do we work on our communication skills to be able to have those tough conversations? And also the balancing of many roles in our lives, whether that's being a mom, a partner, working, having your own company. How do we balance those things when life gets busy? And a quick reminder that today's the last day to grab your early bird ticket. So if you haven't done that already, go to patriciasung.com/retreat, grab your ticket for the retreat that's coming up in the fall. And I cannot wait to see you in person. So I'm so excited for you to meet my friend, Crystal Ware. All right, y'all, we are doing a dual episode here. So we are attempting to meld together two styles and make it into one podcast. And so I'm like, welcome, Crystal, but also welcome me.
Welcome, Patricia. Yes, which is exciting, right? Because everybody's busy. Your audience is largely either working moms, busy moms, whatever. Moms, ladies are busy. We have so many things that we have to do. So we are not any different, right, Patricia? We
Right.
have the same challenges. And so trying to make the best use of our time and get our audiences all this amazing information.
Yeah. So we're going to attempt to fold the two together and do a double episode where it'll be on both of our podcasts. So as you listen to this on whichever one you started at, you can cross over and check out the other podcast and see what great things lie in past episodes. So if you can do like the one sentence introduction, because like I already did an intro, they already heard all your good stuff. But like in one sentence, what do you do?
I help women achieve whatever their dream life is. So, that really looks like something different for everybody. And my goal is to help women believe that it's attainable because I believe it is. And now I want all of you to believe it is too. And so that's what it's about, just bringing the insights and based rooted in wealth and health. You can't have one without the other. And what about you?
Ooh.
I know all about you. We have known each other for several years, actually, everybody. So I know all about Patricia, but how do you summarize what you do for people?
So I'm an ADHD coach for moms. So there's a lot of resources out there for parenting kids. I actually help mom. So when mom is struggling with ADHD, how do we get your life together so that you can actually enjoy it? Which is why I felt like we were a really great pairing because I want moms to know that they can live well with ADHD. It doesn't have to be this like awful cloud that hangs over your head all the time. Like, is it hard? Yes, it is. But we don't have to live in suffering, in burnout, in overwhelm. You can figure out the ways that work for you to be able to be really successful. And I don't even want to say like in spite of ADHD. It's like with your ADHD, you can be really successful with your ADHD.
Yeah. And I really love that, Patricia, because I think it crosses over for even women that may be undiagnosed or they don't maybe truly have ADHD. But the world that we're living in now is so busy and chaotic and crazy. We're inundated with information and activities and schedules that, like, I think the average mom has some of those feelings and challenges
Mhm.
regardless of whether they have ADHD. So I think these are going to be tools and resources that could be useful for everybody.
Yeah. And when we talk about like the things that really work for ADHD, a lot of those tenets still follow for everyone. One of my favorite questions is like, how do you make this easier for yourself? That question works for everybody. There's always ways to make something easier for yourself. And a lot of times we've just done it that way forever, or because our mom did it that way, or because our boss told us to do it that way. And when we critically thinking, look at it and say, like, how do I make this easier for me? Anybody can use those kinds of strategies to make life better because we don't have to suffer as moms. We have too much to do. There's too much going on. We're trying to help all the people. We don't need to do it from a place of pain, suffering, martyrdom.
Absolutely not. I couldn't agree more. The other thing I wanted to make sure, in case people were questioning, is I know you primarily work with moms that have some form of ADHD or other issues in that realm, but do you also help moms with kids that have ADHD that may be struggling?
Yes, because most of the time, if you have ADHD, there's a pretty good chance your kids do too. So if you have ADHD, the chance that your kids have it is 50 to 70%, which is way more than the average. They think it's somewhere like 5. I think it's closer to 10% of people who have it. So if you have it, your kid probably does too.
Got it. Well, I think that's really helpful because I know it seems like pretty prevalent, especially amongst little boys in elementary school. And that can be challenging also. Just how do you handle a child that may be struggling and how that wears on people? So, yeah, excited to dive in and talk about all these amazing things with you.
Me too. And I think it's so hard as a mom because you always want your kid to do well. And when your kid is struggling and you don't know why and you can't figure out the solutions, it pretty much takes over your focus. And all of a sudden, everything else falls to the back burner and you're like, I got to help my kid. So to me, like the two go hand in hand is that I'm here to help mom, but like very aware that when your kid's struggling, all of a sudden that's moved up to first place on the priority list. So
Yeah. Well, and I think they go hand in hand because it's like, as a mom, what are the solutions? How do you parent a child that is struggling or, has different emotional needs? And like, what are those tools and resources? And those are, it's not like we have training books that we come with,
where's
everybody's
the
style
instruction
is different.
manual?
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess let's go ahead. Like, I'll just jump in there of like, when your kid is struggling, like, what do you look for? And specifically, like, when it comes to ADHD, there's so many different ways that it shows up for people. So, like, the way it's going to show up in one person is going to be totally different than how it shows up in another person. There's a lot of themes, but there's not like some like one telltale sign of like, if you just have this one thing, it's like, no, it's a complex neurodevelopmental disorder, and it shows up differently for everyone. So like we all know the classic little kid who's bouncing off the walls, doesn't pay attention, is, driving everyone bonkers around them. And then we're like, oh, that kid obviously has ADHD. But where we don't often notice it is in the more inattentive side. So the students who are doodling or daydreaming, and especially you'll see this tends to be more in women, but not necessarily. Like it's not to say that there aren't little boys who also fall in the inattentive category, which means those little boys also, they grow up to be adults. So this is like across the board. People who are more on the inattentive side of ADHD are the doodlers, the dreamers, but there's also the side of like the chatty Cathys, the perfectionists, the overachievers. ADHD doesn't side with certain traits. It's not only for people who are rich or poor or smart or not that smart. Like there's no group of people who are safe from not having ADHD. So it's like if you're a smart person, you figure out the coping mechanisms that work for you and you figure out how to make it work. You get by. And usually where we see it pop up is when there's been either some kind of hormonal change. So we see it in like when girls get their periods, when you become a mom. So matrescence, when you're going through menopause, for boys in puberty. So you see it in these hormonal changes, but also when you have a large life change. So it can be things like when you have a baby, all of a sudden your life is very different, or you move from high school to college, because in high school, things are very prescribed for you. There's a lot of instruction, first period, second period, third period. You go to college and it's like, did you show up for 9 a.m. class? No one's going to check. Like there's a huge shift in like the structure and how your life is running in a new job. A lot of times we'll see it like elementary to middle or middle to high school. A lot of times it'll show up around like third grade. That's when reading starts to get hard for kids, because that's when we move from books that have like, 1 or 2 lines on a page. There's some pictures to give you clues. And all of a sudden you're now in chapter books that are full page of text and not a lot of pictures. So these are the times where we'll see it pop up more. It's not to say that you wouldn't notice it at other times, but that's where we start to see like all of a sudden either I'm struggling or my kid is struggling. In these patterns are usually when it pops up for people. So it's not just the people who can't sit still. It's the ones who are overthinkers. It's the ones who have intrusive thoughts. It's the ones who are anxious, the ones that are struggling with depression. Like there's just so much more to it than just, hey, I can't pay attention in class.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I wanted to dive in to one question that I think is the hard to answer question, but specifically with kids. I know you have resources for moms that want to, get their life together, get more organized, have an easier way, and don't necessarily want medication. What is your feeling about medication for kids?
So generally speaking, they recommend that you don't start medication until after 5. So when kids are younger than 5, they generally won't recommend medication. The way I look at medication is that, first of all, it's one tool. It's only one tool. You have to have all the other pieces in place to make the most difference. So even if we sort out the medicine, there's still a lot of other skills that we need to have. Like there's a saying, pills don't give skills. Like just because you have the medicine that works for you doesn't mean that you then know how to like organize a research paper or how to clean your bedroom. The pills don't give you skills. What it does is it creates an environment where it is now easier, and not easier for everyone else, easier for you, hopefully leveling the playing field. So something that was really difficult for you before is now easier, so that it's not quite as difficult as it was, but it's not going to be as easy for somebody who doesn't have ADHD. So we're just evening the playing field out. So it's just one tool. But given that, like it's an extremely helpful tool. And my like blanket advice, and it's different for everyone. And I can't say like your family might be very anti-medicine and be like, well, this is it. Take this with a grain of salt. Is that medicine is a really, really helpful tool. And most people don't go find this very helpful tool until the doo-doo has hit the fan. And now you're trying to fix everything else that's on fire and find the right medicine. And that's a lot to handle at the same time. So if you have the option to do it earlier, I would say try the medicine, figure out what works for you. And if you decide it's not for you, cool. But you've got it in your back pocket to know this medicine works for me, this dose works for me, or this medicine works for my kid, this dose works for my kid. I understand how the insurance works. And you have that tool sitting there. And if you feel like it's not needed at that time, great, but you have it there. The problem is it's a really long process to get the diagnosis, find the right doctor, get all the insurance stuff, worked out. Like by the time you get through all that and you start even testing different medicines, it's been several months while things have been on fire and you're trying to help your kid. It's a lot on your patients. It's really frustrating. It's hard. So knowing that if there's like a way you could start that process earlier and get your kid the tool they need, even if you're not using it right now, that's fine. You have it there. Because the thing is, like, if you realize your kid has ADHD in second grade and they're doing all right, like, it's not great, but we figured out it's working. Lovely. But the problem is when they go from fifth grade to sixth grade and then the doo doo hits the fan, you're starting from ground zero. Whereas if you already know my kid does better in the Adderall family versus the Ritalin family, or I know they do better with this extended release, or they do better with this brand, like, because unfortunately they're all different, which is really annoying. Like, it's a lot of trial and error to find the right one. So then when your kid goes to sixth grade and they're struggling, you can be like, cool, we already have a base knowledge and it's going to be a lot easier for us to find the right medicine that they're going to need now, which will be different as they grow. They might need like a higher dose or something, and they may not. Side note, like ADHD medicine is not based on like your age. It's not based on weight. Like you give your kids Tylenol a certain amount for their like weight. No, that's not how it works. So some people need a little bit, some people need a whole lot. It has nothing to do on their size, age, anything like that. So it's like if you have that base level of knowing, it's so much easier to figure it out when they really need it. That's the hard part of like when people start trying and they're like, well, my kid's failing seventh grade and they don't have any friends and then they're like, and now we're trying to test medicines. I'm like, woo, buckle up. We're in for a
You
ride.
got a
Like
lot going on.
we want to figure that out, but like the medicines take time to sort out. It's unfortunately, they have tests that they're running on trying to figure out like if there's a way to know, but unfortunately, those tests aren't super accurate. So for some people, they give great information, and for some people, they don't. So it's like, yeah, I hope they figure out that technology. That would be lovely if they had that. That was like more like surefire. But like, it's hard. And like, even now with all the medication shortages, like, I know what medicine works for me. Now I can't find it. Well, now I have to call the pharmacy and see what they have in stock and be like, does that one work for me? I don't know. It's like playing craps. Like, let's roll the dice and see what happens. It's this like rigmarole of a dance every time I go to get my medicine every month. And, you know, I'll find one that works. I'm like, cool. And they're like, oh, it's out of stock. And then I try another one. I'm like, well, that one didn't really work. They had like a kind of a crash at the end of the day. So let me try this one. It's just, that's really hard. So if you can sort that out when it's not dire, it's so much easier than trying to do it in there. So moral of the story, I think everyone should try it, know if it works for you, because some people it doesn't help. It's a small percentage, but it's something like 15% of people don't have any assistance by medication. But like know if it helps, have some background of understanding what works for you so that when you need it, it's there.
Yeah, I think that's helpful for people to know because it's obviously a struggle for you as an adult to consider, should I take a medication? Should I
Mm-hmm.
try something? Then obviously you layer that on to wanting to make the best decisions for your children and that it's, it can
It's
be
hard.
very stressful for people. So what do you see is the biggest stressor or the biggest conflict with moms that have ADHD and also are struggling with a child with ADHD?
It is that when you are trying to assist somebody who also has a spicy brain and you have a spicy brain,
I love a spicy brain. I like this is
like
a great way
it's
to
my
describe
friend,
it.
my friend Mary Van Geffen. She's a hoot. You should go look her up. She calls them the spicy ones. Yeah, I think she trademarked it. It's her phrase. When you have a spicy brain and you're trying to also wrangle more spicy brains, like it's hard to wrangle one spicy brain. But when you have one spicy brain trying to wrangle another spicy brain, it's a bit of a circus. And when we're trying to teach our kids things that we don't really do well ourselves, it's
Hmm.
really frustrating because a lot of times when you go to the doctor and you get your kid diagnosed, they're like, here's what your kid needs. And they list out all these things that you're like, I don't do those for me. I
Yeah.
don't know how to do those things, but you want me to do them for somebody else. Like, what? So, like, that's why I teach moms the skills that I do because we're the ones expected to be able to teach our kids the things that we ourselves are struggling. I mean, the apple didn't fall far from the tree. And so, we have to be centered and grounded and know what works for us and have that toolkit built for ourselves for us to be able to do that for somebody else. And a
Yeah.
lot of times as moms, we'll be like, no, I'll be fine. Let me just figure this out for my kid. And it's like, I understand that as a mom. I know you're like, but my kid's more important. I got to help them first. But it's like the whole oxygen mask. Like when you're on the airplane, they're always like, especially I fly Southwest, the flight attendant literally always comes over and she's like, you have to put your mask on first. And she makes you give the like head nod. Like, if you can't function, you can't teach someone else to function. It's literally not possible. And somehow we think as moms, we're like, it's cool. I'm juggling all the things. Sure, I'll figure it out. Like when you take care of you, that ripple out effect makes it so much better for your kids. So it can't just be, I'm going to do everything for my kid and I'll figure myself out later. It's so much like it's like swimming upstream.
Well, that makes me think of I've taken to writing. My husband always does morning drop off, and I've taken in the last few months to going with them. And so we listen to music. The kids love to jam. And there's this new song, if you guys haven't listened to it, called Sunday Best by Surfaces, which I thought was a silly name for a band, but apparently the Gen Z folks love that name, The Surfaces. Anyway, part of it's like always blessed, never stressed. And I was like,
Mhm.
guys, is this what mom needs to take in a little more? Like, I am blessed. Now I need to not be stressed. I'm
Yeah.
running around like a crazy person. That's just like my personality. And that is what kids teach you is like, it is a mirror to you of like,
Mhm.
okay, you want them to be relaxed. You want them to be calm. I'm not a calm person. That's just not my personality. And I've definitely noticed it and try to tell myself, like, not stressed. And so now we listen to this song all the time. And I'm like, oh, this is a good reminder for me to start the day. Like, take a deep breath, not going to get all wound up. And if you want the kids to be, more zen, you have to be more zen. They are going to learn from what you're doing. That's the biggest shift that I've looked at making for myself is like, and what's even crazier is my parents weren't stressed. My parents weren't running around like, ooh, we're in a hurry. We're da da da. In fact, even now when my parents are over, they're like, why are you in such a hurry, Crystal? And I'm like, I don't know. Why am I? Why is it like a big deal? Like, we got to get everywhere fast. And so I think that's good advice. I mean, it's just such a good analogy to say we have to put our oxygen mask on first and that they're going to learn what we teach them.
Yeah. I think it's important to know, like, if your personality is big energy, go get 'em, like, we're not trying to squash that. What we're trying to do is make that feel easier for you. Like, you can
Yeah,
be big energy and not stressed.
right.
You can go hard and not be stressed about it. And a lot of times we just smoosh all those things together into one category and you don't have to. Like, because I am a very like type A, I'm an Enneagram 1, like I like things to be the way I want them to be. And like I'm not trying to change who I am, but I don't want my stress level to be embedded into my children. So how do I make sure that I teach them excellence? And also like, but we don't have to be running around like a chicken with our head cut off
Yeah.
and screeching at everybody. Like, it's a hard balance to learn. And as moms, when we're not taking care of ourselves, that stress level just is constantly butting up against everything because there's always another permission slip to fill out. There's always another thing after school. There's always another like nap time looming that, like, if I don't get this kid to bed, then we know it's going to ruin the afternoon. Blah, blah, blah. Like, there's always something else coming as moms. So it's on us to drive the environment. Like, that's really like why I came back to working with moms after teaching. Like, I always thought I would go back to the classroom after my kids were older. And I now know from teaching, it's like, I mean, I have your kid for 45 minutes, or if they're in elementary school all day, like in the school hours, but like they're still home with you more than
Hmm.
they're with me. So when mom is in a good place, the entire family can be in a good place. But when mom's not well, the whole family is struggling and it's obvious.
Well, I wanted to go back to something you said because I wonder if this is something you've talked about before or something that other people have had difficulty with. But you said you're an Enneagram 1, you like things how you like them, you like things orderly. Did you struggle with as the kids got older? Obviously they have their own personality, they have their own way. Did you struggle with just the house in general of like, no, no, we don't do it this way. No, no, we don't put that there. Of like having not just a husband, but now you have multiple children and you can't control the whole house. Was
You
that a
can't.
struggle for you?
For sure. And it's often that I have to ask myself, like, does this really matter?
Yes.
Am I teaching my kids how to do this well in a way that works for them? Or am I trying to smash like my opinion on them of how this should go? Because I have my two boys. One is definitely more like me. He looks just like my husband, but his personality is me. And my other one is so like happy go lucky. Everything's great. Like, he's the one who, like, as soon as he sees that you're a little bit sad, he's the one who runs up and is like, I love you so much. You're the best mommy there ever was. Like, he's ready to like cheer you up. And he's not an organized person,
Yeah.
but he's like the cheerleader of the family. And I constantly have to tell myself, like, what works for me is not going to work for him because that's not his priority. His priority is not that everything needs to be orderly. So when I start getting over the top I remind myself to like look at my kids in their eyes and like really be present in the moment and be like, Patricia, does this really matter? And like, I wish I could say I always remember. Sometimes I wish I had remembered an hour ago, and like that's on me, and I'm working on that. But as soon as I can remind myself, like, what really matters here? Is this important? Then I can circle back to like the goal of I'm trying to raise them to be great people, not necessarily to do it exactly like I do it.
Yeah, the reminder I have for myself is we want to be happy and enjoying what we're doing. Like whatever that is always my goal in life. And that's still, the kind of thing that I want to teach other women. It's like, how do you create a life that you love and that you enjoy? That is the barometer for me is like, are we having fun? Are we having a good time?
Before we continue on, I want to say thank you to our sponsors whose support allows me to bring you this podcast for free. I've got a podcast for you to check out. I'm so excited to partner with Understood Explains this month. This season of the show is hosted by teacher and special education expert Juliana Ortube, and it's all about how to navigate IEPs, or individualized education plans. This latest season of Understood Explains covers things like how to tell if your child needs an IEP, and it busts through a bunch of misunderstandings about special education. I especially appreciated the episode that explained the difference between 504s and IEPs, because when you are the one advocating for your child, the more knowledge that you have on this confusing subject, the more confident you will feel in being able to advocate for your child. All of this season's episodes are available both in English y Español. So if you have a child who you think might need an IEP, or maybe your child's IEP is ready to be updated for the upcoming year, here in your podcast app, search for Understood Explains and add it to your downloaded episodes so that you can take a listen later today. Again, that's Understood Explains right here in your podcast app.
So my oldest son who struggles with, I would say, emotional regulation related to ADHD, he's very organized. He is on top of his stuff for the most part, but emotional regulation, and that's what I talk to him about all the time is like, is this fun? Are you feeling happy? If it's not, why are you letting these feelings and these negative thoughts on things that really don't matter in the big picture? And that's hard for somebody that doesn't have a worldview like an adult worldview, right? And I remember when I was a kid and little things bother you. But that's the thing that, like, when I'm getting spun up about something, it's almost always trivial, right? It's like we're not getting upset about the world falling down or my house is literally on fire. We're getting upset about dumb things in reality that are just started like this. And then it's like the tornado spiral to the top. And it's like, am I about to let this impact my day, overshadow what we're doing? Does this really matter? And it always comes back to me about like the happiness. Like I want to be happy, and happiness is a choice. Truly, we can be grateful and we can feel happiness even when things are not going our way.
Yeah. And I think emotion regulation is like part of ADHD that's the most difficult and the part that's not talked about. I guess it's talked about the least. Like when we kick into gear, when we're upset, it's really hard to turn off that train. Like it is blazing at 700 miles an hour. And the skills that I'm teaching and coaching, it's like we back up to like, you didn't just flip a switch. Something happened earlier in the day that like pushed you a little bit.
Yes.
And something else pushed a little bit. Then something else pushed a little bit. And when we have ADHD, we don't notice as we're moving through levels like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, even 8, we really don't notice that things are starting to go wrong until like 8, 9, 10. And so when we can clue back into ourselves and notice, like, what does a 3 feel like? How do I know I'm getting bothered or upset or frustrated when it's like level 3 or 4? Because I can do something about it when it's at level 3 or 4. I can give myself space to go like, hey, I'm going to go step outside for a sec, or, do something fun, turn on the dance music with your kids, and that will change the environment and change your attitude. It's really hard to change when we're at 8, but when we have ADHD, we tend not to notice any of those beginning numbers. So one of the skills we can learn with ADHD is, how do I know myself better? What are those little things? Like right now we had a banana with the fruit flies and we're trying to get these stupid fruit flies out of the kitchen. It's like these little fruit flies.
Oh my
like
God.
constantly...
It's fruit fly time. I feel you.
And I'm
I have
like,
a trick for that. I'll tell you later.
Okay, good. Because we've tried, I was on goodhousekeeping.com yesterday looking up 17 ways to catch the fruit flies. And so far all of them are 0. 0 for 0 on the fruit flies, or a 0 for 20. I count 0 fruit flies. But it's like those little fruit flies are the things that are bothering us all day long. And yeah, you can deal with fruit flies number 1 through 47, and all of a sudden, fruit fly 48, I should have picked a different number, is like, I can't take it anymore. But that's because we didn't realize that we were getting bothered so much by all those things. And the cumulative effect means that now at bedtime, we're yelling at everybody.
Yep.
But if we had taken a few minutes for ourselves before the kids got off the bus, instead of running around furiously, rage cleaning because we realized we didn't get enough stuff done today, then we may have had capacity to get through the rest of the night. But we can't do that unless we understand like ourselves better and understanding what is using a lot of our energy, what is using a lot of our emotions, and cluing into those so that it's not volcano, disaster, tornado at the end.
And that just made me think of something, Patricia, that I think is an interesting shift for a lot of working moms too. So, if you have a lot of your audience that are working moms, what I have also noticed in the transition since COVID, and I've shifted from being primarily working with people at office, even if I didn't have a long commute, but working here in my office, and then, usually working up until the kids get off the bus, you don't have a space, you don't have a time. And I think that can be impactful too, is like, no matter what, how your day is going, like I'm a positive person. I usually, just have fun. I enjoy what I'm doing. But there are always a little annoyances along the way that you just take in stride. It's no big deal, especially if you're home primarily by yourself and you don't have anybody else to really get ramped up with. But then to your point, you may not have noticed that you are getting slight frustrations that build up. And then your kids come home and, it's chaos or whatever is going on. And all of a sudden you're like over the top.
Yeah.
And that is what I've realized can be hard for me. And I'm sure that a lot of other moms are struggling with that, is like, how do you give yourself just a little bit of a break, walk outside, ground into the earth or whatever it is that works for you, and just have that separation. But I would imagine that a lot of other working moms that have gone remote, that can be a challenge too, because you don't realize with that little drive commute, zone out, listen to music, and how that kind of just gets you in a better headspace before you get home. And then, as I call it, the second job begins. I don't know about you, but I thought when the kids were little and our kids went to preschool together, guys, I thought that things would get easier when they went to elementary school. You didn't have to deal with nap time. You didn't have to deal with other things like that. But their schedules are crazy. So it's like literally a second job at 3 p.m.
Yeah. I think COVID really highlighted that, where we all went from like wherever you were, you had that space to move from work time to mom mode. And I think like this is also the reason that being a stay-at-home mom is so hard, is because you're in mom/work mode all day. It doesn't end. There is no transition time. And if your kids are in school, it's like you're in just a different version of mom mode. And now you're in a new version of mom mode when they come home. It's like there's not that like space for your brain to be like, okay, now I'm shifting. And I think back to like when our kids were in preschool, the schedule's like 9 to 12, or you could stay until 2. It feels like this minuscule amount of time that they're at preschool. It's like by the time you drop them off and you try to go get a bunch of stuff done, it feels like immediately you're going to pick them up again. Again, there's like no transition. It feels like that time just evaporated.
Yeah.
And now I'm back to trying to juggle keeping people alive and doing all the things. And so when we don't give ourselves that space, it's just constant. And that's where the burnout comes from for a lot of moms.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but I definitely, and I was working at that time. So it was my nanny doing that, but she would joke, and she's definitely not in a hurry girl. She is like, life is coming at my pace and that's how it goes. And I honestly, I always looked at that like, I need more of that. This is a good feel. But she'd be like, oh, Miss Crystal, I cannot do that between 9 and 12, picking up the kids. I was like, sure, that's 3 hours. That's a lot of time. But because I wasn't doing it, I didn't realize how tricky that was at all. But I did have the comparison guilt of like, you're making it look so easy. Why do these other moms, who I've always recognized, even as a working mom, I always recognized that, at least for me, staying at home would have been harder. That would have been a more challenging role for me. But I looked at these moms who had this more challenging job in my mind and thought, they're making it look so easy. It just looks so natural. They don't have a break from their kids all day, but they seem just so relaxed and so easy. And I think we need to get away from that too, because we don't really know what's going on back there. We don't know if they're one meltdown away from, ripping their hair out, which which I definitely would have been. I would have
Oh, for
definitely
sure.
been, or I don't know, God bless you, people that stay at home with their children. That would have been the hardest job for me.
Yeah, I did it for a while and I was like, this is not for me. It is hard because you're the one driving the schedule too. It's all
Yeah.
well, okay, I'm like, I won't get on a tangent. So I'm like, we only have a little bit of time left and I still have questions for you. So,
Yes, let's go.
um,
Let's go.
okay, so one of the things we had chatted about before, like we were like, ooh, what should we talk about? Is that like a lot of times women who have ADHD are often people pleasers and we don't want to rock the boat. Or we tend to be very much rocking the boat. We are the bull in the china shop kind of people. But either way, like when you're in a work setting, both of these extremes are hard to deal with when it comes to like interacting with your boss or having hard conversations. And so it feels like there's a lot of like miscommunications and people are upset. And a lot of times women with ADHD, especially when you don't know and you're not diagnosed, you're like, I don't understand why this keeps going poorly. Why does this keep happening? Like you start to get this feeling of like, is it me? Because I keep having the same issue with different people, with different bosses, or the same boss over and over again. And so what I wanted to like jump into is like, look at both sides of the coin here, being somebody who's a people pleaser and doesn't want to rock the boat, and also somebody who says it like they think and then gets some flack for that. When we're in a work setting, or if you're not working, like it could be in a volunteer job that you're doing, like when you're having a conversation with somebody who is in some like position of authority, how can we have these tough conversations that like we really don't want to have, but we need to have?
Yeah.
And
So
if it's too vague, I can give an example.
No, and I can have an example for the latter as a start. So for your audience who may not know, I'm a lawyer by background. I worked in Fortune 500 as a manager. I've been through leadership development. I've helped women have hard conversations on how to get a raise, how to position their expertise, all those things internally to drive their careers forward in whatever manner they want to get to. And so I have been the latter a lot of times. And I remember specifically I was reporting directly to the CFO of a Fortune 50, actually. And he told me one time, like, Crystal, we got some poor feedback about you. And I was pretty sure I knew the conversation that led to this. And I was thinking, first of all, to myself, they're like, why is this other grown man complaining about me? Like, what a sensitive Sally. But to what we were talking about earlier, like you, Patricia, like things to have things right, and you want things done the right way. And when you are working for a company, you want to have the best interest of the company at heart. And that's what I was doing. And I was like, honestly, a little put out that they would complain to me because I wouldn't give them the answer they wanted to hear. That was really what the crux of the conversation was. They wanted some advice. They wanted to hear something specific, and I was not going to say it because I simply did not agree with it. It wasn't going to be the best for the company. It wasn't what I personally believed. And you're not going to bend me. You're not going to bend me. And so I might have gotten a little, flabbergasted or frustrated, and that came through. So thankfully, I had enough clout with the company, with my boss. Everybody knew me and knew that anytime I got animated in a conversation, it was because I very strongly believed in what I was saying. So that was the end of the conversation. But I took it back as a person that likes personal growth, personal development, wanting to better myself. And you said, that we got the bull in the china shop and the people pleaser. I'm not really a people pleaser, but I do care about people liking me. And if people say they really don't care, I think that's a 1 in a million person. I think most people do care if other people like them to some degree. And so that kind of bothered me. Like, why am I being misperceived as like whatever they said? Of course, he didn't tell me exactly what they said, but clearly it was negative. And why would having this, frictional conversation leave somebody with a negative opinion about me when we simply just didn't agree? And so I took that in and thought about it. And then I took it into how I was going to be a leader and how I had to talk to and interact with many different personalities. And so what I would say on that is it really led to eye-opening to how I had been for most of my life, which that's my natural personality. When you get into a broader sphere, a bigger company, you are going to work with a lot of different people. And it's the same and can be analogized with having children. You're not going to have children that operate the same. We cannot have the same conversations in the same manner with different people. We have to be aware enough of how somebody is leaving clues in the conversation, that they're not feeling comfortable. They're not taking it the way you're meaning it. And so communication is a two-way street. And so what I encourage people is to step back. If you have to take a deep breath, put somebody, oh, sorry, I've got somebody walked into my office. Let me put you on hold for a second. Get a hold of yourself. And I never cross the line of like yelling at anybody. I would never do anything unprofessional. I have seen people do that though. But what is the pace in your voice? You have a naturally slower cadence when you're talking than I do. That alone, me talking like this and da 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 da, people have asked me if I'm a New Yorker. No, I'm from Texas. But those kind of things are small things that you can work on along the way that will make a huge difference in how you're perceived. If you can take your voice down a little bit, even if you're upset, you're going to come across kinder, gentler, more willing to negotiate, more willing to come to the same place. It does not mean, and I want to be very clear about this, it does not mean you have to agree with people on things that you do not agree with to come across as a good, genuine, nice person. But when we think about a few communication skills that we can do, that's where I say, the pause is important. The cadence of your voice is important. And the tone of your voice is important. And so if we can focus on those three things, I think we're going to be taken a little bit better. And it is unfortunate that as women, we could have the same way of speaking as a man and we're going to be perceived negatively. It is just a fact. I don't let it bother me. It is what it is. We have to modulate, we have to regulate, and that's the way it is. On the other side, because I've seen extremely smart and intelligent women who are people pleasers and they are willing, I don't even say willing, it's like they don't want to, but they end up just agreeing with people. And I think that can be difficult if you're looking to be promoted, have leadership, get certain kind of special projects or otherwise, because it subtly says to people in the organization that you're a little bit of a doormat and that you may not be willing to follow through. And that is even more difficult for women when you want to get along, you want to be a people pleaser, you want for things to be happy, and collegial, and you don't want to rock the boat. That can be even more difficult. And I think you just need to remind yourself that you're there to do a job, that you're there to work together, and that generally people are not going to be upset if you disagree in a professional way and you explain your positioning. And I think a lot of times that comes from a position of confidence and feeling that you really are the expert on what you're talking about. But I actually do think it's more difficult to overcome the people pleasing.
Yeah. I would say for me, I've had to do a lot of work in therapy to realize that I would change what I was doing because I was trying to control what the other person thought of me. And so I was doing what I thought they wanted. And I didn't realize that that's what I was doing, like deep down in the depths of childhood trauma. And so now that I've worked working through that, I don't know that I fully mastered it, but realizing that I don't have control over what other people think of me, no matter what I say. I can't control what they think of me because that comes from their perspective. It comes from their history, their experiences. So that's not anything that I can control. So if I can't control what they're going to think of me, then I may as well be me, because me changing to do something else still isn't going to get me the result I want. And so when we practice that in some low stakes ways, I used to do really silly things. Even if my food wasn't quite right, I'd be like, it's fine, I'll just eat it, I don't want to bother. No, practicing if you order something in a restaurant and it's wrong, saying, I'm so sorry, I ordered this with no cheese, would you please bring me one with no cheese? Or even you're at the coffee counter and you're like, excuse me, could I have a straw? Some people won't even interrupt the person to get a straw. Those little ways that you are practicing inconveniencing somebody, quote unquote, inconveniencing them, and seeing it's fine. That barista was totally happy to get you a straw. It did not bother them. Yes, maybe the waiter rolled his eyes when he got to the back, but if you really don't want cheese, it's okay. You can say you don't want cheese. That is a skill we may have to practice to be able to work through that. And it's just scary for those of us who have always opted for, I'd rather shrink back so that there's not conflict.
Yeah. And it can be hard. I mean, I have some very good friends that are non-confrontational, and I joke to them about it sometimes, or I'll know that if we're about to have a moment and I push a little bit, it's okay. We're going to still be friends. We don't have to agree on everything. But those are the people that it makes me really upset to see, because I see them in the corporate sphere getting dumped on, the ones that are sometimes very, very brilliant, but they stay to the background. They are taking on a lot of work. Sometimes they're taking on a lot of work for a boss that is getting paid double and they're not doing anything because they're giving all their work to this person. And that's, I mean, at the end of the day, it is what is your personality and what is a fit for you. But if you're looking to move ahead, you have to have a voice of some sort. You have to work on a team and you have to be okay having a little bit of conflict. And I think those are great examples of how you can practice that because those are everyday things that we can just work on to see it's not a big deal. I'm just going to speak up for myself. It doesn't mean I'm getting angry or being mean, just advocating for yourself. And that is what we as women need to do on a regular basis to continue to propel ourselves forward.
Hey there, Mama. I've got something fun for you. Who doesn't love a quiz? I want to know, which mama animal are you? Because you're not your average mama bear. You have a magical ADHD brain that puts a sprinkle of brilliance on everything you do. Sure, you may have forgotten that laundry in the washer for the third time, but what are your strengths? What makes your ADHD parenting style unique to you? How do you use that sparkle to bless your family? So which mama animal are you? Find out by taking the quiz. What's your ADHD mama parenting style? Because you're not your average mama bear. Head on over to patriciasung.com/quiz and find out. And then when you do, I want you to post your results on social media so we can see that you're #not your average mama bear. Along with the hashtag I'm a mama, and then fill in the animal that you get. Again, that's patriciasung.com/quiz. And I can't wait to see what you get. So tag me at Motherhood in ADHD.
Okay, so Crystal, if we take that like tough conversation stuff that we just talked about and apply it to like, I want to ask for a raise at work, what would be like your top 3 things of like how to approach that conversation as somebody who is a confident person or someone who tends to lean towards people pleasing? Like either way, how do you approach that conversation to say, I deserve more money?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's always good to set a few minutes in person, just walking by your boss's office saying, hey, I have an important conversation I want to have with you. Let me know if you have a few minutes today or tomorrow. If you are the more reserved people pleaser type, maybe you feel more comfortable sending an email and saying, can we have a few minutes? That's okay. I think regardless of which side you're on, it's important to have a few notes with you. So like if it's just 3 or 4 bullets, even more so for a more reserved person, they might be more confident to have those. But for somebody that is extremely big personality, the bull in China shop, I think the one thing that you're going to have to be conscientious of is you may not get an answer right then. And you need to realize that it's not going to benefit you to push, push, push in that moment. You can continually, subtly push for the background over the next couple of weeks, months. How are things? What will I need to do? But it's more about asking the questions. If you don't get the answer you want right away, what are the follow-ups? What can I do? How can I position myself? You're asking for clues, for them to give you clues on what they want to see so that they can advocate on your behalf. It's usually not going to be the next manager's ultimate decision. If you're a more soft-spoken, non-conflict type personality, you're going to need to have more data so that you feel confident, so that it's not really a conflict. You need to prove to yourself, there is no conflict here. These are the things that I have achieved. I deserve this. Why would there be conflict when I have these facts in front of me to show you? And that can be facts of what you've achieved, the projects you've taken on, the time you've put in. It could be a result you've driven of, I sold this new client and I brought in $10 million for the company. And, or it could be market driven. My position I've noticed is being elevated in other companies, and I need to also be elevated so I stay on par. These are all factual things that are pretty difficult for another person to argue with. And so there is no conflict. If you come from that place of like, this is uncomfortable to me, but there is really no true conflict, then you can have a little bit more comfort in entering the conversation.
Do you recommend having that conversation just around like the, annual review time? Or is this something that we should be talking about like throughout the year?
I'll give you the great lawyerly answer. It depends. It's always easier to get a raise during the annual review time, but I say start the conversation. If you know you're going to want more than the 2, 3, 4%, the average, and you feel you deserve and you have the support for that, start 2 or 3 months before, because usually the formal process is like 4 to 6 weeks and they kind of already know. So give your boss the opportunity to align things behind the scenes that will give you the best chance. And that's going to be doing it a little bit more in advance. However, if you are about to look for a new position within the company and you know you want a significant bump, or if you've just finished a project or brought on a new client, maybe those are good times. And those would be off cycle raises. If there is an opportunity and you feel that you deserve something more, take the opportunity when it presents itself. There's no, riding a high wave of an achievement is always going to be a great time, especially if that achievement internally brought in money. Then it's like, okay, this is a good time to ask. So I say it always depends. You may talk about it at the annual raise, but hey, you know what? If you just brought us to a new level of achievement internally, even if you got your 4% raise in January, that doesn't mean you can't deserve to get another one. So there are no hard and fast rules. I mean, big companies have harder and faster rules. There can always be massaged, but there's no hard or fast rules on income and salary and negotiating. So don't hinder yourself with those. If you feel in your heart you deserve it, find a way to make a plan to get it.
And I think like when we bring ADHD in the mix, a lot of times like we're not as aware of it because it's not front and center. But then when, raise time comes up, then we're like, ooh, I need to ask for a raise. But a lot of times, like you were saying, there's that, you got a lag time. And if you're in the annual review season, a lot of times the managers have already done their like shifting and moving and wiggling around before they have those conversations.
Yep.
So you want to bring it to their attention before they start allocating all their funds, because if they only have so much to give, which they probably do, you want them to know and be reminded of all your achievements before they start thinking about that, because it's a lot harder for them to change things after the fact than if they've already had the meetings and done the organizing and know like who's getting what raises. And then you bring it up and they're like, well, but we already decided that like 3 weeks ago. So if you want to do this, like, okay, let's pause right now and say like, when is your review season? Like, when does that happen? And put a reminder on your calendar for like 2 months before that to send that email or have that, pop in the office. Hey, I want to talk to you when you have a sec, with sufficient time to have that conversation before those conversations are happening behind closed doors.
And I would say to the ADHD brain, don't overthink it. I know it's so, I literally overthink what kind of coffee I'm going to have. So I am not, this is like pot and kettle, right? I'm telling you this. I know it's not always easy, but don't overthink it. Just do it, like Nike says. Let them overthink it. You present the facts of how amazing, how brilliant you are, and let them figure out the rest. Don't talk yourself out of it. And so if it's on your heart and it's on your mind, also don't wait a month, because you're going to talk yourself out of it. So we've got to understand how our brains work, how we are negotiating with our own internal selves, and get beyond that. And I think that comes from just doing it and not giving ourselves too much time to get scared, to talk ourselves out of it, to compare ourselves to our colleagues. It's not you versus them. It's just you.
Yeah.
So you talk up you. Don't worry about what somebody else is doing. Don't worry about what your boss is going to think. Just ask.
Yeah. And if you have that conversation, like literally tomorrow, even if they're like, well, we can't do raises for another 3 months, at least they know.
You
They know
planted the
it's on.
seed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the things you said, Crystal, reminded me of this thing I've been telling myself for probably about the last year, is that I'm not going to take any opportunities off the table for myself. Like, I'm not going to be the one who says like, no, you can't do that. No, like they're not going to want you to be on their podcast. No, that person's not going to want to talk to you. Like, I'm not going to eliminate anything as a possibility before I even jump into it.
Right.
And that was a big shift for me to be like, wow, I was really like, you said, negotiating with myself out of things like before I even started. It was like, what? I'm the one who
don't
like, I
realize
cut it
you're
off before I
doing it.
started.
Yeah, you don't realize you're doing it because it's so much subconscious thoughts going on. And that's why it's like, just ask. I know for the person that doesn't like conflict, getting a no feels like conflict to you. It's like, they don't like me. They don't want me. Da, da, da. It's not personal. It's just like, you presented them with the opportunity. They don't want to go with that. But if you don't ask, you will never get. So many times I find that women, even more so with ADHD, you're talking yourself out of things before you even know what the other person would think or say. And so it's like, just ask, don't overthink it. If it's a no, it's a no. So what? The most successful people in the world have heard no a million times and kept going. That's how they got there. They didn't get there because they took the path of least resistance. They didn't get there by having everybody just love them and fall all over them. They got there through a lot of closed doors that they just kept knocking on.
Okay, I have one more question for you.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if you have any more for me. I posted in my community, like, hey, what kind of questions do y'all have for Crystal? And Katie asked for your advice on strategies of how do you balance work and family time, especially in the summer when the kids are home more and, schedules have shifted. How do you find balance in that season where things are starkly different from the school year?
I will say this is pretty new to me. So it's also on my mind. This is a great time to ask this question because I had been working more traditionally until the last like 2 years. So, one, I put my kids in camp, at least a half day camp or so. And then what I've started to do is like right now, I am really trying to get the bigger things that I want to have done off the plate by May so that I'm just doing things that feel easier to me because I'm not like, people that know me in real life, sometimes when I talk about my challenges are very surprised to see that I don't do the things that I feel that are going to be hard. Like we've talked about a lot, me starting my new website and things like that, the welldefinedwoman.com, and the tech of it just makes me crazy. And I'm like, once I start getting in there, I'm like, okay, I can do this. This is not that challenging. But in my mind, I put that these things are so hard. So I try to do all those kind of things that I know I'm going to be resistant to before when I have the whole day to like get things done and then know that the easier stuff, the run of the mill stuff, I can do kind of like from my phone if we're at the park. And then I just have lower expectations. Like, this is the season of life. This is what I've chosen. This is what I believe for me, God wants me to be with my children more, to invest in them. And I have just got to have lower expectations for myself, which is very hard for me.
Yes.
And I just have to do that. That is where we're at. And I just have to remind myself all the time that life is not a rush. Tomorrow will come. I can get things done in the time that I get things done. It also means that I need to be more efficient. And sometimes, like I said, I will stare at things and do all the other things that are super easy instead of the one thing I really need to do. And I have to force myself to be better about that because the time is limited. And that's just what it is. So it's having self-awareness, understanding your own challenges, having grace with yourself, and then realizing you're not going to get as much done. And that is okay because raising children, keeping them alive, loving them, dealing with their fighting, that is a job.
Yeah.
I think this has been, for me, awesome, Patricia. I think that this has pulled up a lot of information. I think the only other thing that I had from my perspective that I think is helpful, again, for women with ADHD or without, is like, what is your biggest piece of advice for women that suffer from perfectionism?
Ooh. So I have done a lot of personal work on perfectionism and realizing that it is a coping mechanism, something that kept you safe and took care of you for so long, but it's grown legs and run away in a way that if you feel like it's perfectionism, that it's not serving you like it was meant to originally. And what it comes down to is reminding ourselves that like we are good enough just as we are, regardless of how many to-do list items you've checked off today, like what you've accomplished, how many promotions you got, like all that doesn't determine our worth. Our worth is inherent because we're people who deserve care, and you don't have to be perfect because that was never the expectation of you. So there's that fundamental piece, but then the strategic piece is actually practicing not being perfect at stuff and being okay with like B- work, which is so hard when you are a perfectionist. Like, I don't remember which year it was, probably somewhere around like 2021. My word of the year was failure because I made myself do things that I knew I wasn't going to be great at from the start. And usually when you're a perfectionist, you're like, well, if I know I'm not going to be great at that, I'm not even starting it. Practicing that I made mistakes, I screwed up stuff, I didn't do a great job at that. Like, I really wanted to pick up calligraphy. It looks gorgeous. I have not figured it out. The letters always look wonky. Like, it's okay. I tried it. It's not the hobby for me. And that's okay. Like, even in those little things of like, how can you practice like no risk failure? Calligraphy, no one's going to die if my letters aren't formed right. Like, that's just fun. But that's a way that I can practice it not being perfect. And there's no harm. So when you start to tell your brain, like, it's okay that I messed this up, I'm still okay. I'm still safe, even though I made these mistakes, that's how you can start to rewrite that narrative in your head that you have to be perfect all the time.
Yeah. And just doing it. I mean, I would say that I started learning tennis in the last year and a half, and I didn't want to go to these classes because I was like, I'm going to be the worst. Well, guess what? I am pretty much the worst one in these drop-in classes, but I've gotten significantly better. So like if I didn't go because I was worried about what everybody else was going to say or how I perceived my performance and was I worthy of being in this group, I would not be playing as well as I am now. I mean, like somebody is always the worst at something. I mean, even like in professional golf, like there's somebody always at the bottom of the leaderboard. It just is what it is. Doesn't mean they don't deserve to be there.
Yeah. I always remind myself too that like, for example, like when you're in the tennis class and you realize you're not the best one, most of the people really aren't paying attention to everybody else. We just don't have capacity to pay that much attention to other people. But the people that are noticing that you're not doing a good job are probably the other perfectionists, which again, it's going back to like, that's their perspective because they're feeling like they have to be good at everything all the time. And that's a reflection on them, not on me. So I'm going to go out there. I actually took my first tennis lesson yesterday. Like, I am not good. And
it
like,
is not easy.
It's
Tennis is
not.
hard.
And I played softball. So like the whole angling the racket thing is a whole new world. And if someone else is making a comment about my terrible tennis skills, that's a reflection on them. It's not a reflection on me. I'm the one who's out here on the court trying to get better.
Yeah.
That's worth celebrating.
Yeah.
Not the person who's judging from the sidelines. So
exactly.
But that's been a long
what
time.
What did I heard a saying the other day, and I think this is a prevalent thing, but it's like, you know, the only people that are going to stand around telling you shouldn't, couldn't, or aren't doing it well are the ones that are not doing it. The ones that are doing it are going to support you, celebrate you, and push you forward and encourage you to keep going. So do you want to listen to the naysayers or do you want to listen to the people that are out there doing it?
I want my advice from the people on the court.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think this went well. And I think we have so much gold for everybody here.
I know. There's so many times I kept jotting down like, ooh, that was a good one. Ooh, that was a good one.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, I do want to ask you my lightning round questions. So
okay, great.
Super fast. Like literally don't think about it, just answer. And then at the end, we'll both tell everybody where to find us. And that way the ladies listening can connect. All right. Number 1, the best thing that I've read or listened to recently is?
I always recommend, oh my gosh, the book, it's on my nightstand. Why do it's a fable. Oh, it's going to drive me crazy. I'm not good at remembering things. I only remember things that are like totally important. But I recommend this book for everybody, and I will give it to you and we can put it in the show notes. I read it every year because I just think it helps you. What is your destiny? Where are you going? And it's a short 120 page or something book, but it sold like 100 million copies. That's going to drive me crazy.
That's okay. We'll put it in the show notes. All right. Number 2, my most boring about me fact is?
I hate doing the dishes. Like literally hate doing the dishes. And so I let everybody else do the dishes.
Number 3, when I'm having a rough day, my go-to quote, song, poem, book, podcast, activity, whatever is?
I try to sit in the sun and remind myself that I am grateful, that I am blessed, and that God gave me a purpose.
And you're living it. Okay. Number 4, don't tell anyone I.
It's an adult show, right? Don't tell anybody I read slightly smutty books.
Number 5, if I had a magic fairy wand for one spell, I would give myself triple patience. That's a good one. Okay. And number 6, my best piece of advice for mamas with ADHD is?
Grace. Just give yourself grace. Every day is a new day, and be patient with yourself and not too hard on yourself.
Okay. So now tell the moms, where can they find you?
I am for people that, you know, are into building a career, business, whatever it is. I am pretty active on LinkedIn, Crystal Ware Risk Strategist. And then I'm building out my new site. It is live, but it's not totally populated yet, but it is thewelldefinedwoman.com, where I want to encourage everybody to build the well-defined life that you deserve, that you are worth. And that looks different for everybody, but we all have a shared vision of making our dreams become a reality. And I'm also on Instagram, but, you know, kind of. What about you?
Oh,
where are you at?
You can find me at patriciasung.com or motherhoodandadhd.com. So that's my handle on all my social media and everything as well. And you can head over to my website. There's patriciasung.com/toolkit. And there I've got literally like a bazillion resources. So like if you want to look at like a symptoms checklist of like real life, what does ADHD look like for like a grown woman? there's so many things there. How to calm down. There's a whole pile of them. So go grab some support that's free. And I would love to see you at, like, we have a community that meets every Wednesday. We have a retreat coming up in October. So yeah, come meet your people. If this is all resounding with you, find the people that get you and make friends and find support. Like, we don't have to do this alone. So
No, and I would say that is the biggest thing of where we are in the world is women having less community than we ever had in our lives. And so if you are feeling alone, there is a community for you somewhere. And I encourage you, if that is the biggest thing, the biggest blessing to me is like where we live, we have a good community. But I highly encourage, because I think that we are meant to live and work and do life together as women, but our society has not put it that way. And so that is the other reason I wanted to create this website, where it is like its own little community, and we will be having retreats in the future also. But that is, I think, the biggest thing. I think we would see an improvement in mental health if women had more resources to be together.
Agreed.
So awesome.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this, and we totally went longer than I said we would. So thank you. It was a good conversation.
Yeah, thank you too.
All right.
For more resources, classes, and community, head over to my website, motherhoodinadhd.com.